Hey guys, Sue's here. Welcome back to another Keto Dinner Ideas video. This week we filmed 4 new easy keto recipes. If you're new to our channel, we make these what's for dinner on keto videos every single week to give you a little motivation and inspiration to get in the kitchen and get your keto meal prep and batch cooking on if that's how you prefer to do it. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button please and join our crew. Let's get into the video. First up, I made this awesome lasagna stuffed chicken. It tastes just as good as it looks. So to start with, in a medium-sized bowl, I'm adding a cup of ricotta. Make sure you check your carb count on that really well. And then I'm adding a half a cup of grated Parmesan cheese, 1 egg, and then I'm just gonna mix this up a little before we add our seasonings. And when I say check your ricotta, I mean some of it has like double the amount as other brands. So the cheaper, the less carbs is what I've noticed. Next, I'm adding a tablespoon of Italian seasoning. That's just a blend, half a teaspoon sea salt and 1/4 a teaspoon ground black pepper. And then I'm just going to continue to mix that until it's all combined and smooth. And I'm going to stick this to the side. It's going to be our filling for our chicken. Along with that, you also need 2 cups, if you follow the recipe, of low-carb marinara sauce. I'm using Rayo's. You could use less than that if you want, but make sure it's low carb. Next, I'm taking 3 large chicken breasts, and I'm just cutting them in half like so. And then after I cut each of them in half, I am slicing through the middle to form a pocket. And then as I get them all done, I'm just putting them into a 13 by 9 baking dish. Now the way I slice my chicken through the middle, it does make half of the chicken breast thinner than the other half, which I actually like because I like eating the thinner ones, but if not, you just cut yours accordingly. And I'm just showing you a couple of examples. We're cutting it almost all the way through, but leaving it still connected on each piece of the chicken, just to make a pocket to stuff. Now once I have those all done, I'm just gonna open them up and take a good sized spoonful of sauce, stick it inside the chicken, spread it out. And then I'm also going to take a nice sized amount of our ricotta cheese mixture and also spread that out inside the chicken. And I'm just going to go ahead and do all of these. That way I can evenly distribute all of the ricotta. Now once I have them all filled, we're just going to close the chicken pockets and then just kind of arrange them in our pan the way we want them. And then we're going to pour the rest of our sauce over this. Now the recipe, like I said, called for 2 cups of marinara. I really think that's overkill. I think 1.5 cups at the most is all you would need. But because it's the first time I'm making her recipe, I just went ahead and followed her instructions on it. But after making it, I think we could have lessened that and really decreased the carb amount even more in this recipe. So do what you feel there. So I'm just evenly spreading that out on the chicken, and then I'm topping it with an additional cup of shredded mozzarella cheese. And I'm popping this into a 400-degree oven. I did mine uncovered for 40 minutes. And here's what it looks like when it comes out. It was just long enough to make sure our chicken is all the way well and just get a little bit of brown and crispness on top of that mozzarella cheese. And here it is plated up. This was super delicious. Oh my gosh. I mean, pretty much anything with cheese and ricotta cheese especially in it, I love. Like anything that remotely resembles lasagna is always a favorite for me. But this was also perfect for meal prepping because we could just store it in the fridge and heat it up and eat it all week. Next up, I threw together some pan-seared pork chops with some green beans and some feta cheese. So to start with, the serving size on this recipe is 3 because that's just how I had them packaged. These are about a 1/2 inch thick bone-in pork chops, and I'm just putting some salt and pepper on each side of them. And I did forget to cut slits in the fat on these, so they buckled a little when I was frying, but if you want to prevent that, go ahead and cut little tiny slits in the fat and it will keep them nice and straight in the pan. So then to a large saute pan, I'm adding a tablespoon or 2 of extra virgin olive oil, letting it heat up on medium-high heat until it gets nice and shimmery. And then I'm adding my pork chops in a nice Tetris-like manner. I was lucky they fit together well. I'm gonna cook these for 5 minutes on this side undisturbed. And instead of moving the pork chops around in the pan, you can see I just kind of turned the pan a little to make sure they're cooking evenly. Then I'm gonna flip them over. Look at that beautiful color on that. And I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. Now have it on medium-high for this, and at the last minute of cooking these on the other side, I went ahead and cut it down to medium, and I'm just removing these to a clean separate plate and letting my pan cool down a touch. before adding in a tablespoon of butter. Now I'm just gonna let that melt, and I'm using my spatula to just scrape all of those bits off the bottom of the pan, and you can see some of those look kind of like little burnt bits, and they're kind of all clumping together here. So once I got them kind of gathered there, I could just pull them out. Now I'm adding 1/3 cup green onion to my pan. I used probably 3 nice sized stalks of green onion and just used the white and light green parts from about 3 of them to get this amount. I'm adding that to the butter and cooking it about a minute until it's a little softened and nice and fragrant. And now to that I'm adding 2 cups of long stem petite green beans. These are previously frozen, thawed them, drained them, putting those in the pan and spreading them out in an even layer, and then adding about 1/4 teaspoon sea salt and some red pepper flakes to give them a little bit of spice. And then I'm just going to stir these up and cook them for about 2 minutes. And then I'm just going to kind of gather them to one side so that I can add my pork chops back into the pan. I'm going to cut the heat down to medium-low and then add our chops back in directly to the pan. I'm just kind of scooping these other beans on top there to make room for the last one, before adding it back into the pan as well, and then just evenly spreading those green beans out around them. And then I'm sprinkling 1/2 cup of feta over the top of that, popping the lid on and letting this cook on medium-low for another 10 minutes. And this is what it looks like afterwards, nice and steamy. And here it is plated up. This was so delicious. I usually give my husband the leftovers, but I totally ate the last pork chop. Actually, just finished it while I'm doing this voiceover, and it was awesome. Next up, we have this awesome keto taco soup. This is adapted from a recipe from Maebell's that I will link in the description box down below. So I decided to make it in the crock pot. To start with, I added 2 pounds of browned ground beef. You can see it's kind of hard to get out of this container. My husband actually cooked it for me the night before, just drained the excess grease and put it in a container in the fridge. To that, I'm adding an entire can of Rotel, and I did not drain the juice from it, and 1 small can of tomato paste. It's a 7-ounce can. I know this seems like a lot of carbs and tomatoes, but this is a huge batch of soup, so it all works out in the end. To that, I'm adding 1/2 cup diced bell pepper, and I just used some that I had in the freezer. And I'm adding about 3 ounces of frozen mild chilies that I had left over from a can. She calls for 2 4-ounce cans. I used what I had. It's still hard for me to get groceries delivered, and we're in an area that COVID is greatly on the increase, so we're opting to have groceries delivered. So we had to work with what we have, and I think it worked out fine. I just stirred that in a little bit, and then I'm adding the equivalent of 1 jalapeno that is diced up really finely. I just used jarred jalapeno slices and added as many as I thought would be 1 jalapeno and ran them through the little processor. And then to that, the recipe calls for 1 package of taco seasoning. I always make my own, and I didn't have any pre-made, so forgive me, I'm being a bad keto person right now because I did not measure this. I just always do it by hand, so measure yours definitely. But I just threw in some cumin, a little onion powder, a little garlic powder, some oregano, some paprika, some chili powder, dash of cayenne pepper, and about 1/4 teaspoon sea salt, and a good bit of ground black pepper. And there you go, that's my taco seasoning. To that, I'm gonna add 5 cups total of beef broth, and I always like to use low sodium broth because it's kind of scary when you look at how much sodium is actually in prepared broth. Then I'm stirring that all together really well. And again, I'm changing the cooking method a little. Obviously, I was in a rush with this recipe and I was not cooking it all day. So I am going to pop the lid on and cook it on high to start with for 3 hours. And once that part's done, I'm just going to give it a little bit of a stir. And then I'm going to add 4 ounces of room temperature cream cheese that I just diced up. And I'm also going to add 1/4 cup heavy cream. Stir this in really well. And then I'm going to turn it to low and cook it for an additional hour just to let all of that melt in and cook together. And once that's done, some of my cream cheese still wasn't broken apart, so I'm just taking my spoon and kind of mashing all of that onto the side of the crock pot to make sure it's all melted and incorporated. And here it is plated up. I topped mine with a little bit of sour cream, hot sauce, and sharp shredded cheddar cheese. I love this meal because it basically cooks a big double batch, so there's enough to eat for lunch all week and then to also freeze half of the recipe. So it's perfect for keto meal prep. Next up, an oldie but a goodie, just a London broil, which I'm sure most of you also cook, and I'm sure you cook it the same way. This was a childhood favorite of mine that my mom always made. So to start with, I took a 2-pound London broil roast, and I have it just in a little plastic container to marinate it. And I like to do this the night before. I'm adding 2 to 3 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. And then I'm adding about a heaping teaspoon of minced garlic, and I'm just adding some of that on each side of the London broil and rubbing it into the meat. Afterwards, I am putting a little, this is pink Himalayan sea salt, but you could use whichever type of salt that you like, and then some freshly ground black pepper as well, and I'm doing that on both sides. And then I like to go through and poke a lot of holes with a fork in it. London broil is a tough cut of meat. This helps tenderize it a little, and it also just helps the seasoning and everything get all the way through it. And then I'm gonna pop a lid on this and just stick it in the fridge. And like I said, I like to marinate mine overnight, but I would say at least do it for 8 hours, you know, like do it in the morning and let it chill in the fridge all day until you get ready to cook dinner. Now I also like using an old school broiling pan for this, just like my mom. So I have one here. It's 2 layers. I'm spraying it with a little cooking spray, and what you want to do is let your London broil come up to room temperature before you cook it. Just sit it out for about 30 minutes before you get ready to cook, and then make sure when you're broiling you have your door crack. And I always like to put my broiler right on the second notch down from the top, I guess about 6 inches from the top. I like mine rare to medium rare tops, so I'm only going to do mine for 8 minutes on each side. And after the first go around, I'm just taking a meat fork and flipping that over, and I'm gonna pop mine back in for another 8 minutes, but adjust your cooking time accordingly if you like yours done more, because I like mine really rare to medium rare. And here you go. Afterwards, I just cooked mine to 125 internal temp, which is a medium rare. But if you like yours cooked more, cook yours longer. Then I just am cutting it on a diagonal, and I like to shave it down really thin. As you can see here, look how beautiful and pink that is. I love it. In the meantime, I steamed a bag of broccoli, and I'm taking the bottom half of that broiler pan with all of those awesome London broil juices and seasonings, pouring it over the broccoli, adding a cut up tablespoon of butter and a little bit of sea salt. And I'm just gonna mix that together until my butter's melted and serve that on the side of it. And here it is all plated up. This is our London broil with our steamed broccoli on the side. This is a classic comfort food meal for me. My mom always made this when I was little and growing up, and I would beg it off of her. Anything with Worcestershire sauce is one of my favorites. I wish it had less carbs in it than it does. There you go, guys. That's this week's Keto Dinner Ideas video. I hope you enjoyed these easy keto recipes and that it gave you a little motivation to get in the kitchen and get your keto meal prep on. Make sure you are subscribed to our channel so you never miss our What's for Dinner on Keto weekly videos. Make sure you share this with your friends. Give it a thumbs up, comment down below. That really motivates us to keep making these videos. And until next time, bye guys.